Thank you, friends. It's times like these when we can affirm with strength and a full heart, and it's important that we do so, affirm that we share in one work, one grand circle of activity which includes a diversity of initiatives and points of focus and fields of service, each group playing its part to the best of its abilities and in line and integrity with its mission, and each group nurturing the emerging new civilization and culture in humanity. And it's in this spirit that I'm especially delighted to be exploring the theme of radiant temples of life in terms of what's happening at the United Nations, where a new set of goals for the future of humanity is being developed and discussed with considerable intensity. In 2015, next year, by the end of next year, the United Nations Millennium Development Goals are due to expire. 8 clearly defined goals for human development, each with a set of measurable targets, were agreed by heads of state at the UN during the visionary days leading up to the threshold of the new millennium on January the 1st, 2000. A promise was made, a serious promise, that by the year 2015, the international community would ensure that each of 8 goals was achieved. Firstly, that extreme poverty and hunger would be reduced by 50%, that there would be universal primary education for all boys and girls, that gender equality and the empowerment of women, particularly in primary and secondary education, would become a fundamental part of every society, that the percentage of children who die before they reach the age of 5 would be significantly reduced, that the ratio of children who die in childbirth, mothers and children who die in childbirth, would be significantly lowered. So these are not extreme goals. The whole planning for these goals was what is possible to be achieved. That HIV, AIDS, malaria and other significant diseases would be seriously combated. And that environmental sustainability would be built in areas like the loss of biodiversity, the decline of forests, and the proportion of people who have no sustainable access to safe drinking water and sanitation. And the 8th goal, that there would be a global partnership for development in which all countries would participate. The economically wealthy nations supporting development efforts that have proven to have results in the developing countries. Now these goals, the Millennium Development Goals, represented a breakthrough in the 7th ray work of building a world that truly reflects the oneness of life and the value of each individual life. For the first time ever, a common development agenda for the human species, a vision of what could be achieved in the future with a serious, intelligent assessment of how it could be achieved, had been defined and agreed upon by world governments. To me, if you look at the history going back from Roman times, Egyptian times, this is something of profound significance. It's the most inspiring thing of we human beings. And when we say we human beings, we should think of our family, our neighbours, the people who live in our street. That's the human community, wherever we are, as a group of people. So different, such different values and ideas, and yet the 6 billion of us have achieved this goal. The goals and targets defined in the MDGs mean that it's now possible to measure progress each year on a country-by-country basis, or even in many cases on a city-by-city basis, to get true competition. This has changed the agenda in development issues, so countries can be held accountable and aid can be targeted to what works in achieving the goals. Journalists and any citizen Any citizen, this little laddie, any citizen can easily carry out their own research to see if the goals are being met. Governments are challenged to work together on a common agenda, and people of goodwill, organised through professional organisations, popular development movements, local government business, are also challenged to contribute in their own way. The dream of the MDGs was to unite not just governments, but peoples of the world in a cooperative shared task. And this dream, this vision of potential, setting of an intention, is to be celebrated. So there's evidence 2 years before the MDGs are due to expire that a number of the goals and the targets will be met. Already the proportion of people living in extreme poverty, less than $1.25 a day, is half of what it was in 1990. And this might have been expected to be the most visionary goal, the most impossible goal. In 1990, 47% of people in developing countries had an income below $1.25 a day, and by 2010, 5 years before the goal's target, this had been reduced to 22%. The proportion of people without access to reliable sources of drinking water, those easy words to say, but you think of it. Every day, you have kids, and every day, you can't get drinking water that you know is safe. The proportion of people without access to reliable sources of drinking water is half what it was in 1990. Another target met. The health objectives in Goal 6, HIV, AIDS, TB and malaria, have seen considerable progress. Primary school enrolment of girls equals that of boys, another target. On current trends, these goals will probably not be met. In spite of efforts, it's unlikely that all children will attend primary school by 2015. The goals to reduce the mortality rates of children before the age of 5 and to improve the maternal health concentrate on 75 countries. In 75 countries, over 95% of all maternal and child deaths occur. And only 9 of these countries are on track to achieve Goal 5, reducing the maternal mortality ratio by 3/4, and 22 of the 75 countries are expected to achieve Goal 4. So there's 2 ways of looking at that. One is to say 22 countries will achieve that goal, that's fabulous. The other side is to say there's all that work still to be done. And now, over the coming 2 years, there is a rare opportunity to ignite just such a popular will to build a better world, centered on a new set of goals, replacing the MDGs after they expire at the end of 2015. There is an unprecedented level of thinking with research teams, academic papers, universities in every country of the world, focus groups, media commentaries, websites. An unprecedented level of thinking, discussion, debate and negotiation at national and global levels on what will replace the MDGs after 2015. For the first time, this didn't happen in the development of the MDGs. There is an intense effort to engage the broadest possible array of participants in the process that will lead to decisions by governments at the UN on a set of goals and an agenda for the post-2015 world. A great deal has been learnt from the MDGs, and the new goals, which will most likely be known as the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, will be even more targeted to what works, and also they will have different and broader points of focus. The depth of consultation and discussion that's taking place to define the new goals is, I believe, an extraordinary sign of an awakening will. There is a high-level UN panel involving heads of state and leading world servers. It's chaired by the Prime Minister of the UK and the President Sirleaf Johnson of Liberia and the President of Indonesia. There is a special advisor to the Secretary General of the UN charged with overseeing the process. There is a Sustainable Development Solutions Network of leading sustainable development experts and academic institutions from around the world. There is an open working group at the UN consisting of representatives of 30 governments, holding regular meetings on specific themes. And actually through this, at this time every month, there is at the UN a gathering, a meeting of the open working group on one of the issues, one of the themes. Civil society, NGOs are present and their opinions are being sought. A variety of different opinions about development are being aired in this gigantic discussion and negotiation, including, for example, the chief architect of the MDGs, the economist Jeffrey Sachs, and one of the leading critics of the MDGs, another wonderful development economist, Paul Collier. While the MDGs had 8 goals, the discussions this time are around 11 broad themes: inequalities, governance, growth and employment, health, education, environmental sustainability, food security and nutrition, conflict and fragility, population dynamics, energy, and water. And each of these themes is looked at in terms of a whole lot of cross-cutting issues, even things like family. And everybody, people everywhere are invited to participate in the discussion, and there are places for everybody to weigh in with their opinions and their thoughts. This process has been going for some time. The primary website, in a sense, for civilian population is a site called worldwewant2015.org. It all depends on what happens as the process of defining the goals and the way in which it structures proceeds. And a key factor is the extent to which the energy of the new group of world servers and people of goodwill can be focused and concentrated on achieving the goals and of singing the body electric, singing the goals so they become a thing of beauty and of pride in being human, about now for the first time ever this is possible for us as human beings. Will people of goodwill be inspired to achieve the goals? Will they inspire you, your friends, your family, and your work colleagues? And that's a question I have, reading this to think of writing this. These sorts of questions are like, they can be a threat. Will we succeed, won't we succeed? To me, it's more a question of what a magnificent, joyful opportunity we have ahead of ourselves. And how amazing to be living at a time when this teaching about the initiation of humanity and the awakening of the world disciple is so fundamentally a part of the events of what are happening around us. And in a sense, all we're asked to do is, in our mind and in our heart within our head, take this on with its magnificence, its joy, and its beauty, and see that that's what our life is about, whatever we're doing. If we're artists, if we're poets, if we're doctors, if we're architects, if we're whatever we are doing, it's only the imagination that allows us to see our life in relation to this opportunity. Only the imagination. Anyway, it's good. I've gone well on time. One thing I wanted to finish with My wife has a wonderful... she watches a website called worldmeters.info. And it's one of those things that's got a whole list of clocks counting down, and you can look at anything you're interested in. And sort of on a regular basis, about once a month at least, she will go in and she is watching the clock that shows the number of people who didn't have safe access to drinking water and now do. And it's phenomenal. And so when we go to meetings at the UN or the Spiritual Caucus, she always brings up, now it's such and such. So that you can, and then the other thing that she looks at most is the percentage of the energy use in the world that's coming from renewable energies. And it's a statistic. But it shows you that the wind is behind the back of Aquarius. Of course it is, because it's the Aquarian wind. And when we get depressed because of the battles that are part of the reality of the political life of any nation and any people, we need to constantly remind ourselves of the bigger picture. And something like this website, worldmeters.info, the greatest value of it is it's the sort of thing you can talk about when you go to your barbecue next door.